My guest today is Alana Marcoccia, an educator, painter, and ceramics artist. Alana has a lifelong passion for art and has produced some stunning pieces with her own unique style and expression. She's also passionate about helping others learn art, helping them to grow in confidence and gain the same fulfillment from it that she has. She started her artistic journey at a young age and has most recently had her work displayed in public places for the world to see. Despite some challenges along the way, which led to a period where she stopped creating, she's now producing what she feels is her best work. In this episode, she tells me her story of how she arrived at where she is today and what it took to regain her artistic inspiration. Please welcome my guest, Alana Marcoccia. Hi, Alana.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
It's really nice to see you.
Yeah.
You're obviously an artist,
hmm
and you've done art for most of your life, as I understand. What was it that drew you to art in the first place?
I don't know. I started drawing and painting from a young age. So it was like anytime I had the opportunity, I would draw, I would paint. I think the earliest memory I have is drawing on my parents' fireplace and yeah, not having paper. And I remember getting in trouble for that, but then it became like a talking piece. Like, oh, she started her career painting on the house.
So
Yeah,
do you feel like you had a kind of predisposition towards art?
I think so. Always drawn to it. It was
Yeah.
my favorite subject in school.
And
hmm
was that something that kind of ran in the family, or were you kind of the first?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I have like my grandfather's a carpenter, so he would do beautiful woodworking. I always say that's who I got my eye from because even when I would paint, he would take a look at what I would do and always have like a criticism or some feedback for me. So I think that's where I got my artistic eye, but not in terms of painting.
Ah, okay. So when did the painting become an interest?
For me, it was right away, but I don't think anybody in my family had done that either. Um, yeah, it was always something that I enjoyed, and I think it was something I was successful at, so it made me feel good.
I see. And I suppose that feeling of accomplishment and skill, was that the kind of what gave you the bug for it and made you kind of want to keep doing it? The fact that
I
you knew
think
you were
so.
producing good work.
I think so. I think I knew it was good based on what people would say, but later in life, it was harder for me to believe that it was good or to kind of get out of like that childhood desire to paint and not think it was like professional, yeah, professional enough or good enough to exhibit.
Did that matter to you? Like that, did you sort of worry, is this good enough? Or did you just do it purely for the pleasure?
I think so. I think it did matter. I have always, I think, strived to belong or find that sense of belonging. So some way that I could have that was through art.
Okay. And was there anything specific, and I suppose this applies even to this day, is there anything that kind of inspires you to keep doing it?
Now, I would say it's definitely an outlet for me. Yeah, I didn't because I didn't paint for a long time. And coming back to it, I've realized it's part of me.
And was that what made you sort of go through those phases of kind of doing it regularly and then stepping back from it? And was there anything that kind of triggered that?
Yeah, so I had painted my whole life and then went into university. Actually, my degree was at first to be in business. And then I wasn't very successful in my first year at university. And one of my mentors was an aunt that I have, and she had encouraged me to continue to do the things that I loved, and art was one of them. So she said, "Why am I going into a business degree when that was what I loved to do?" So I switched my degree to art. And then my intention was to graduate from that, become an artist, teach. But in my last year of university, I was in New York for 9/11,
Right.
and that was quite traumatic. And I realized just recently that all of those goals that I had, I couldn't see past the present. So I was focused on finishing university, but anything new, I didn't want to take on. So I had stopped reading altogether.
And was that experience of being close to 9/11, did that, what was it about that that kind of made you turn away from art?
I think it was just the trauma, and not being able to see those goals to fruition. Like it wasn't something that I was pursuing yet, but I was able to complete my degree. But then getting into teachers college, I didn't even try. Um, I was working part-time at a bank, so I decided to continue that, and then it kind of just got lost in life, and I stopped creating.
So do you find that kind of whether it's experiences like that and life commitments just kind of overtook you
Mhm.
and you kind of lost sight of that original passion?
I think so. I've had to reinvent myself a couple times, like in just in general. I ended up in a relationship that ended pretty badly, and when that ended, I kind of then had this flip and reframed the way I saw things, and knew I had to kind of pursue what I love to do. So, but my first goal was to get back to teachers college, become a teacher. So I was working full time while going to school full time. So there wasn't a lot of time with that creative piece, and it was so out of practice that it wasn't something that I gravitated to right away.
And what was it that triggered that sort of redirection towards art? Did something in particular re-inspire you to, or help you recapture that imagination or that passion that you had originally had?
Yeah, so I always appreciate art. Like, so anytime on social media, I follow a lot of different artists and, or even with my friends. But one of my friends had taken a pottery class, and her work was just beautiful. And it wasn't like anything professional, but it was something that I thought, oh, I'd love to try doing that. So I ended up taking my first pottery class, and I hated it in the first 5 weeks. It was a 10-week course. I was like, this isn't working for me. My fingers don't like work this way. But then I got my first piece back, after it was glazed, and loved it. And I just thought, okay, this first wonky bowl, I'm going to keep going. And just taking that 10-week course just got me back to wanting to create. I didn't have any vision of what my art would look like, but it just got me back into that creating mode.
And did you find that the art that you produced in almost like the second phase of your artistic journey, was that any different to what you'd done before in view of kind of experiences that you had had in your life?
Yes, for sure. I think before it was always like based on some sort of criteria on like an assignment. Um, or it was just stuff I liked to draw, or people would ask me to draw or paint. And in this now phase of it, it's more I want to do what I like want to express. So I've got more into abstract, um, the creative, or sorry, creative, the expressionistic like way of being. So like even behind me, I have some landscapes. They're not photo. realist or anything, but just that expressive way of using paint and the brushstroke. Um, I really gravitate toward that.
Yeah, I mean, I can just see there in the back that they're absolutely stunning pieces.
Thank you.
Um, and I believe one of those was featured on the Amsterdam metro system as
That's
well.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So that was just through the networking that I've been doing and talking to people. And somebody had asked me if I would create something based on the United Nations water goal of sustainable water and clean water. And that was what I came up with. It was Water is Life is what it's called, and it was animated and then displayed in different places. The prints are being sold in Amsterdam as a fundraiser. And then it ended up getting displayed in the metro system, which was really cool.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's brilliant. And that kind of abstract style that you've got, almost dreamlike, mesmeric sort of style. Where did that come from? Is that something that you came from within you, or was it inspired by other artists?
I've also loved Van Gogh, so I can't deny that there's like some inspiration there from his brushstroke and his color. Um, but I think it was just the movement of it. I do other styles as well, but this is my favorite.
And I assume that gives you more pleasure and satisfaction than the kind of art that you used to do, where it was more kind of doing what you thought was supposed to be done as opposed to what was your preference. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Do you think
Yeah.
that, what do you think about art as a sort of therapy for people? I mean, it sounds like from your point of view, for example, it was quite therapeutic. Do
Hmm.
you think that, what's your view on that?
So even in teaching, um, I use art to connect. And so the kids often will say, I can't draw, I can't do this, I can't. So I always start with something that's easy entry. Abstract art is a way. And so seeing like the development of some of the students that I worked with and finding their confidence because they start to realize that they're creating beautiful things started to make me realize those effects of what art can have. So when the pandemic hit, I was teaching online for a year, and the kids, we ended up supplying them with some watercolor paint. Watercolor was never something that I wanted to do, but I ended up um, just finding my way with watercolor so that I could teach it and found this like just abstract way of using watercolor that started to inspire and made me think as I was painting about like or reflecting. I shouldn't say think because I wasn't thinking on what I was painting, but I was reflecting on my life while I was painting. And so that turned into a series, my connection series. And I'm currently doing that on watercolor on paper, but then also translating it to my ceramics. So using the same style onto three-dimensional forms. Hmm.
And what is it about that type of art that you're drawn to as opposed to? I assume you're quite a multidisciplinary sort of artist, aren't you? But
Yeah.
what is it about ceramic art in particular that you
Um,
like?
it's the frustration and the satisfaction that comes from it all at the same time because it's such a multi-step process. Where at painting, I could make a mistake, I could fix it right on the spot. But with ceramics, you're building. If it dries, but you didn't compress the clay, it'll crack. Um, you might end up with broken pieces coming out of the kiln. You've got to then paint them, laze them, put them back in the kiln, and then at that final stage, they could chip. So it's a challenge, I think, more than anything, but it also becomes really beautiful because we're putting in a different dimension.
So there's
Hmm.
almost an art to the creation or the the process of actually,
Hmm.
creating or painting the patterns and the art, as opposed to, you don't have to think about when you do a painting. It's just there, isn't it? It's like a 2D surface. So,
Hmm.
whereas ceramics, you've sort of more, it's a more complex process, it sounds like.
In some ways, like I find painting now, if I'm painting something representational, and especially if it's a commission piece, it actually gives me a little bit more anxiety over doing some of the abstract work or the ceramic work. Because the ceramic work, you're going to have mistakes happen, and you're going to have to make multiples of things in order for the one thing to work out.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a different process completely. I think you were right there, but that's the part that draws me to it.
yeah. And you were talking earlier about the kind of satisfaction or that feeling of accomplishment, because it's a different sort of process. Do you get that same kind of satisfaction at the end of it, of knowing not only is it a really beautiful pattern, but also your sort of skillful way of doing it helped create that full,
Yeah.
3D piece of art?
I came a long way from my wonky pieces. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So I do see the accomplishment in that. Like I've got a couple bowls. So here's the like a set that I've done.
yeah, it's lovely that.
Yeah, so it's like a nesting bowl and they connect on the rim here. So like the whole idea is like them connecting, but that abstract kind of piece. And I have the painting. So this is like one of the watercolor
Oh,
pieces.
that's lovely.
So that was like translated onto
I see.
that. Yeah.
So do you do that initial kind of design to begin with, and then translate it onto a 3D surface?
I actually like hand paint right on to the surface. Um, but it just became part of the process. So there's no real plan except for colors.
Yeah. How
So
do you
I just,
decide on the colours? Is that just, do you just decide on the spur of the moment, or do you plan kind of, in advance?
it depends. Yeah, so it's planned, but it's also like I've got different color schemes, but it's usually based on a color theory. So complementary colors are always a good thing. So the ones that are opposite on the color wheel. But then I always add a third color in just to break it up a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, it's called a split complementary.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay, right. I think that particular pattern that you just showed me is quite characteristic of your work, isn't it?
Hmm.
That's almost like a bit of a trademark of yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely though. I really like it. Um, and yeah, just kind of on ceramics, is that something that you have introduced to sort of young people as well that you work with, or do they take more to the kind of traditional painting expression?
Yeah. So with my role now, it's easier for painting just because I visit kids at different schools and we kind of chat and talk, and sometimes we'll paint or draw together. And that's just easy for me to bring with me. But at the guild that I belong to, I have taught the clay camp. So in the summer for a week. And it's cool to see them inspired by what they've made as well. And so it's really fun to see them find some inspiration or to find a new art form that they love. So
Mm.
yeah.
And do you see kind of the a change in any of them from being introduced to that as an activity? Do you see, does it give them sort of discipline, or do you see any change in their behavior? Like, does it?
I don't know if it's a discipline, but yeah, in terms of behavior, it's getting them to be more confident. So when they start to believe in themselves, their behavior will change. So oftentimes they don't have or they don't know what they are good at. So it's kind of introducing them to something to be good at. Yeah. But they have to believe it. One of those things is subjective. It doesn't have to look perfect. but they have to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you think that anybody can be a good artist, or do you think that it's something that you really have to train sort of really intensely, or is it something that anybody can do?
I don't think it has to be an intense training. I think there has to be a passion for it in some way, shape, or form. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like art, again, is subjective, but there is meaning behind it. So you can do it as a hobby and it can produce some beautiful things. And that could also be considered art when you're doing something representational. It really all depends on the person and how they interpret the process.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And
Mhm.
do you think that people who are kind of predisposed to art or have that passion that you talked about, do you think they see the world differently, and do you think that they respond to the world differently than people who don't have
Mm,
that in it, or do you think it doesn't matter?
Well, I think it's just a different way of seeing the world, like being visual or looking at the world. For me, it's like with color and shape. Um, those things draw my eye. But you've got people that like work with music in that way where they can hear rhythm, where they can hear tone, and that can inspire them. Where I don't have that. I have an appreciation for music, but I it's not a creative outlet for me. Um, and then even like with people that are more kinesthetic or they're like sporty, like that gives them some sense of satisfaction or fulfillment. Um, so it's different, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right.
Hmm.
And for you, are there any other outlets that you have except for the art that you've spoken about? Or do you have any other outlets that
Uh,
give you that same escapism or that same focus?
Being in nature for sure. Um, like I'll take a lot of pictures when I'm out and walking or traveling or all of that. Like just seeing different landscapes is really inspiring for me. I love the sky. Like that's in my landscapes. Like I love the sky. Often my photos will be of the sky. So,
Yeah, there's something quite uplifting about sort of anything, any particularly scenic sort of views, like
mhm.
involving the sky or trees or anything natural.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, there's something quite grounding and relaxing about that, isn't there?
yeah,
Almost
absolutely.
brings you back to a sense of calmness, without
Hmm.
all the manic busyness that goes on around us in everyday life.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a tranquilizer, I think.
yeah. Like behind me, the one picture. So I have done three different versions of the same landscape. That's the one of the Cherry Hill paintings. And so that's just a park that's behind my house here. So when I walk my dog, when we go at a certain time when the sun is setting, like, and there's one spot that I stand and I can get this beautiful view of the sky with the cityscape. And so I'll often take pictures from that same spot. And that's what inspires me just based on the sky.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm sure that's nice after a long, busy day, isn't it? Just to
Mhm.
go there and experience, the nice scenery.
Yeah.
Um, and just going back to sort of your role as an educator,
Hmm.
um, do you do you find how do you sort of introduce um, art and painting and things like that to children? How do you sort of get them interested? And do you meet resistance, and do you have a way of kind of convincing them that they'll enjoy it, and then do they ultimately kind of realize actually they do like it?
Hmm. Depends. It depends on the kids, but for the most part, when I would have a classroom with the kids, they knew how much I loved it. So it was almost like sharing some of my joy with them. And so most of them wanted to try. Like I had them do some tough stuff, like where they had to do self-portraits. um, and really look at themselves. And so I do a lot of identity work with kids because it's really important that they understand who they are and appreciate and love themselves. So it's hard for middle school kids to look at themselves really intently to draw themselves, but it's a beautiful thing when they embrace it and they see how great they did and just showing their expression. I did one project which I loved with abstract where they had to unify. So it was like they got a piece of paper, split it in half. They only painted on one side, and it was an abstract work that was however they were inspired. And then somebody else picked up their unfinished piece and had to finish it on the blank side. So it was really cool to see some of these creations, and it turned into where they wanted to do more. So I bought a giant canvas for the class. We divvied it up into a bunch of rectangles so that they could each paint one spot and picked a number, and everybody did one square at a time. But it was cool because they had to stand up in front of the classroom and paint, and that's intimidating. But they loved it. Like they were encouraging each other. They were just like, even when they were feeling like, oh, this is going to be hard, the others would encourage them, and it just brought the class together. And it was really beautiful to see the connection. And then they got this final piece that I still have. Um, we had it actually hanging in the school that I was working at for a long time, and the kids would come back to visit. Like it was just one of those beautiful assignments that I think you'll just live in a piece of work. So yeah, it was just great to see them get that confidence and to connect with each other.
Mm. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's definitely it's a bonding activity, isn't it? Art. It's
Hmm.
something um, that they can sort of have a shared experience over, isn't it? And I think whilst learning, it's also fun.
Yeah.
If done in a kind of particular way, I think one of the things that can sometimes be off-putting might be sort of if it's taken too seriously. Sort of
Hmm.
if if they feel like there's pressure on them to do well. But I
Hmm.
think if it sounds like if it's made fun, it's something that they actually engage in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just giving them a safe space. So being okay with mistakes, being okay with, oh, I really liked what that was, and showing them how they could change it if they wanted, if it didn't look the way they wanted it to look. So just creating a safe space really helps kids to feel like they can just be who they are and express themselves.
Absolutely. I think it's that theme of freedom, isn't it? I think kids naturally play, don't they? And they want
Hmm.
to express themselves. And I think it's a form of playing, isn't it? When you have that freedom to just express yourself in any way you like, whether it's a portrait or whether it's painting or it could be glitter. It's I think the beauty of art is that there are no limits.
Right.
And I think I think children respond well to that.
Yeah. No limits, but also just to trust themselves, which is a hard thing to do when you're still trying to figure out who you are.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And for you personally, what sort of do you have any skills or areas of art that you want to learn more about or grow in, or any areas that interest you in particular?
Oh, absolutely. I always well, watercolor was always like scary to me because I was like, I don't know how people use them. But just delving into them and trying them, it's like probably my favorite way to paint as well. Um, but it is one of those ones that if you make a mistake, it's hard to fix. So it's again the challenge of it. Um, but yeah, anything sculptural, I'm still working on how to make things that I can envision, but I don't know yet how to execute them, I guess. So, not just with clay, like even with other pieces. And I'm looking into now doing more sculptural paintings. Um, but that's like taking a trip to the hardware store and finding some like drywall compound and seeing what I can do with that. But I've never used in that way before. So yeah, it's just trying and being okay with the mistakes. And I find the mistakes is where my ideas come from. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that again, that's the beauty of something like this is it is, there is room for mistakes, but you learn from them, and
Hmm.
sometimes those mistakes actually turn into an interesting idea.
Absolutely.
So yeah, no, that's great. And in terms of what you do currently with your ceramics and your painting, is there anything else coming up for you?
Yes, I have. Well, I was so busy the last few months that I wasn't creating, so I've started creating again. My goal this year is to sell some of my work in a more official capacity, so I might partake in a market. I've applied to an exhibition, so I'm waiting to hear if I got juried into that. And then this summer, I'm going to go back he's a retired professor who has offered some of us to go up and to do a workshop. He's run a couple workshops over the summer. Um, so I'm going to do that, and then another workshop right after that on soda firing. So a different way to fire pottery. So just different technique. And then we'll see what happens. But my goal is one day that I'll open a studio and be able to teach and create and sell and offer lessons, workshops, and maybe some of those like non-clinical art therapy approaches for kids and for adults. Hmm.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen the work that you've done, and it's absolutely stunning. So
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll achieve a lot in your artistic journey. Um, but yeah, Alana, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
And I will definitely be following your work. Where can people see your work, by the way?
Right now on Instagram, so at Alana Mar underscore arts, yeah, is my handle.
Great. Right. Well, it's been great having you on and talking
Thank
to
you.
you and finding out more about you. And yeah, I wish you all the best. And keep up the great work.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for having
All
me.
right. No problem.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye.
A big thank you for listening to the very first episode of Full Insight. I'm really looking forward to doing many more and speaking to many more fascinating guests. So until next time, take care and I'll see you again soon.